The radio hissed with static before Hayes's voice crackled through, shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. Command, this is Bravo 2. Confirm, Sergeant Vance is KIA. I saw her take the mortar round. Direct hit. 15 feet below the ridge, buried under a collapsed stone wall, Sarah Vance heard every word. Blood ran warm from her left ear, pooling in the snow beneath her cheek. Her eyes stared up at the slate-gray sky, unblinking. She tried to move her arm toward the radio clipped to her vest. Nothing. A timber beam pinned her chest like a coffin lid. The command channel crackled back. Copy, Bravo 2. Execute immediate withdrawal. No body recovery due to hostile fire superiority. Through the gaps in the rubble, Sarah watched the Black Hawk bank hard right. The rotor wash kicked up snow devils that danced over her face. Then it was gone. The sound faded to nothing but wind and the distant crack of small arms fire. She was alive, and they just left her to die. The briefing room at Forward Operating Base Viper smelled like burnt coffee and stress sweat. Sarah Vance leaned against the plywood wall, arms crossed, watching the mission map flicker on the projector screen. Simple recon, ridge surveillance, eyes on a suspected weapons cache in the valley below. 72 hours, in and out. Captain Miller stood at the front, his weathered face carved from 58 years of military life and bad decisions. Gray stubble covered his jaw. His eyes, though, those were still sharp as bayonets. Vance, you're taking Hayes with you, Miller said, not looking up from his tablet. Sarah's jaw tightened. Sir, with respect, Hayes isn't ready for... He needs field hours. You need a radio operator. Problem solved. Miller finally looked at her. There was something in his expression. Not quite an apology, more like a warning. Keep him close. Kid's got good instincts buried under all that fear. Private First Class David Hayes sat in the corner, his fresh out of basic face pale under the fluorescent lights. 20 years old. Soft hands that had never dug a fighting position in frozen ground. He avoided eye contact with everyone, especially Sarah. Hayes, Sarah called out. The kid jumped like she'd fired a gun. Grab your gear, we leave at 0400. Yes, Sergeant. His voice cracked on the second word. Miller caught her arm as she headed for the door. His grip was iron hard, his voice low enough that only she could hear. This one's a runner, Vance. First sign of contact, he'll bolt. I've seen it before. Then why send him? Because someone has to teach him not to. The Chinook dropped them 3 clicks from the objective at dawn. The mountains rose like broken teeth against a bruised sky, all jagged rock and snow that had turned to ice in the overnight freeze. Sarah led the way up the eastern approach, moving through scrub pine and granite outcrops, with Hayes struggling to keep pace behind her. Sergeant, Hayes whispered for the 4th time in 20 minutes. Shouldn't we stop? Check the map? We're en route. Keep moving. Sarah didn't slow down. Every time Hayes opened his mouth, she heard Miller's voice in her head. Runner. They reached the ridge observation point by noon. Sarah set up the M110 sniper rifle on its bipod, scanning the valley through the scope. The suspected weapons cache was there all right. 6 buildings clustered around a dried riverbed. Armed men moving between them. Too many for a simple recon report. Hayes, get command on the line. Tell them we've got at least 30 hostiles, military-age males with AKs and RPGs. Hayes fumbled with the radio, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped the handset. Viper 6, this is Bravo 2. We have visual on... Sarah grabbed the radio from him. Viper 6, Bravo 2 actual. Confirmed 30-plus armed hostiles at grid reference Alpha 79er. Requesting updated ROE. Miller's voice came back clear and calm. Bravo 2, maintain observation. Do not engage. Report any movement toward your position. Copy that, 6. Bravo 2 out. She handed the radio back to Hayes. The kid looked like he might throw up. You need to calm down, Hayes. This is just watching. What if they see us? They won't. Not if you stop broadcasting fear like a radio signal. She turned back to the scope. Now shut up and do your job. It happened at 1600 hours, just as the sun started dropping behind the western peaks. Sarah was scanning the valley when she caught movement on her right flank. Not in the valley, behind them, up the ridge. She swung the rifle around and her blood went cold. 15 men, maybe 20, moving through the rocks in a tactical spread. Insurgents in mixed civilian and military gear. They'd been flanked. Somehow, impossibly, the enemy had gotten above them. Hayes, she hissed, contact right. Get on that radio and call it in. Now. But Hayes was frozen, staring at the approaching fighters with eyes like saucers. His breathing came in short, rapid gasps. Panic attack. Of all the goddamn times. Sarah grabbed him by the vest and shook him hard. Hayes, radio! Do your job or we both die here. The first shots cracked out. Rounds slammed into the rocks around them, sending up puffs of stone dust. Sarah returned fire, dropping the lead fighter with 2 rounds center mass. Then she grabbed Hayes by the collar and hauled him toward the only cover available, a half-collapsed stone shepherd's hut 10 meters down the slope. They made it 5 meters before the mortar round hit. Sarah heard the whistle, knew what it was, shoved Hayes ahead of her, and dove for the ground. The world turned white, then red, then black. The concussion wave picked her up and threw her like a rag doll. She felt herself tumbling, weightless, then the crushing impact as she hit the stone wall. The wall collapsed on top of her. Sarah woke to the sound of her own breathing. Wet, ragged. Her chest felt like someone had parked a truck on it. She tried to move and pain exploded through her ribs. Broken, at least 3, maybe more. Her left arm was pinned under a timber beam. Her legs were buried in rubble up to the knees. Blood ran down her face from a gash on her scalp. More blood from her left ear. Ruptured eardrum. She could hear, but everything sounded like it was underwater. Then she heard Hayes. Can't get to her. They're everywhere. I tried. I swear I tried. The radio. She could hear the radio clipped to her vest, but she couldn't reach it. It was 6 inches from her right hand. Might as well have been 6 miles. Bravo 2, what is Sergeant Vance's status? Miller's voice. Tight. Controlled. The voice he used when he was forcing himself not to lose his shit. She's gone, sir. The mortar hit her directly. I saw her go down. There's no way. Hayes's voice broke into a sob. I couldn't save her. God, I couldn't save her. Sarah's heart hammered against her broken ribs. She tried to scream, but only a weak croak came out. Not loud enough. Hayes was running. She could hear his boots crunching through snow, moving away from her position. Bravo 2, confirm KIA status. Miller again. There was something in his voice now. Doubt. KIA confirmed, sir. Sergeant Vance's. She didn't make it. A long pause. Then, copy Bravo 2. Execute immediate withdrawal. Vector to extraction point Charlie. Black Hawk will be on station in 15 mics. Roger that. Bravo 2 moving. Sarah watched through a gap in the rubble as Hayes appeared above her, scrambling up the slope toward the ridgeline. He looked down once. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. She saw the recognition flash across his face, saw him understand that she was alive. Then he turned and ran. The radio crackled again. All stations, this is Viper 6. Be advised, Sergeant Sarah Vance is confirmed KIA. I say again, Vance is KIA. No body recovery authorized due to hostile fire concentration. Through the gap in the stones, Sarah saw the Black Hawk appear over the ridge, saw it hover for just a moment, rotors thrashing the air. Then it banked hard and disappeared behind the mountain. Gone. She was alone in enemy territory with broken ribs, a ruptured eardrum, and a radio she couldn't reach. Alive, abandoned, and somewhere above her, Hayes was telling Command his version of how hard he tried to save her. It took Sarah 20 minutes to work her arm free from under the beam. She nearly passed out twice from the pain. Her vision grayed at the edges, but she forced herself to stay conscious. Unconscious meant dead. Dead meant Hayes won. She got her right arm to the radio and keyed the mic. Static. She tried again. Nothing but hiss. The damn thing was broken. She flipped it over and saw the problem. The battery compartment had been crushed by falling debris. The radio would receive, but it couldn't transmit. Perfect. She could hear everything they said. She just couldn't tell them she was alive. Sarah pulled herself forward, inch by agonizing inch, dragging her legs out from under the rubble. Both legs worked. Not broken, just buried. Small victories. By the time she cleared the debris pile, the sun was setting and the temperature was dropping fast. She inventoried her gear. M110 sniper rifle, damaged scope but functional. 3 magazines, 30 rounds total. M9 sidearm, 2 mags. Combat knife, first aid kit, water, 2 liters, no food. And a radio that let her hear her own funeral arrangements being broadcast over command frequency. Body recovery mission is not authorized, a new voice was saying. Operations officer. The area is too hot. We'd be risking a full platoon to recover remains. Understood, Miller replied. His voice was flat, emotionless. But Sarah knew him well enough to hear what was underneath. He was furious. What about Hayes's after-action report? He's being debriefed now. Initial report indicates Sergeant Vance performed admirably under fire before the KIA incident. Sarah's hands clenched around the rifle grip. Admirably. Hayes was probably in the fob right now, drinking coffee and telling war stories about how he tried to drag her to safety, how he'd fought off the enemy, how he'd barely escaped with his life. The radio crackled again. A different frequency this time. Not command. The enemy. Sarah had spent enough time in the mountains to pick up basic Pashto and Dari. She caught maybe 1 word in 5, but it was enough. They knew someone was still alive. They'd seen the collapsed building, saw the blood trail. They were organizing a search. 3 fighters, maybe 4, sweeping the area before dark. Sarah checked the M110. The scope was cracked, but still functional at close range. She chambered around and waited. They came from the east, moving in a loose, tactical formation. Sarah watched them through the scope from her position in the rocks, 50 meters upslope from the collapsed hut. 3 fighters, 2 with AK-47s, 1 with an RPG. They were careful, professional, not the usual rabble. The lead fighter reached the rubble pile and called out something in Dari. Sarah didn't catch the words, but the meaning was clear. Anyone alive in there? She put the crosshairs on his chest and waited. Not yet. Not until she had to. The fighter climbed onto the rubble, looking down into the space where Sarah had been trapped. He turned to his companions and shook his head. Sarah caught the word, Marg. Dead. They were about to leave when the fighter with the RPG noticed something. He bent down and picked up Sarah's canteen. She dropped it during her escape. He held it up, called out to his friends. They weren't leaving. They were tracking. Sarah made her decision. She squeezed the trigger. The lead fighter dropped without a sound. The M110's suppressed shot echoed off the rocks like a crack of breaking stone. The second fighter spun, trying to locate the source. Sarah put him down with a shot through the throat. The third fighter, the one with the RPG, ran. Smart move. Sarah let him go. 3 rounds spent, 27 left. She had to conserve ammunition. More importantly, she had to move. The runner would bring back friends, and they'd bring a lot more than 3 men next time. Sarah climbed down from her position, checked the bodies for anything useful. She found a working radio on the lead fighter. Chinese knockoff, cheap plastic construction, but it worked. She turned it on and listened to the enemy frequency. They were coordinating something. She caught the words helicopter in American. They were setting up an ambush for the next medevac attempt. Then she heard something that made her blood freeze. Miller's voice on her damaged radio. All stations Viper 6. Be advised, I am personally authorizing a reconnaissance flight over the KIA site at first light. Black Hawk will do a single pass to confirm hostile disposition. No, God, no. Miller was sending a helicopter into a trap. Sarah keyed her broken radio, tried to transmit. Nothing. She tried again, holding down the button so hard her thumb went numb. Static. The radio was receive only. She could hear them planning their deaths, but she couldn't warn them. She looked at the enemy radio in her other hand. Maybe she could use this to broadcast on their frequency, warn the helicopter off. But that would give away her position, bring every hostile in the valley down on her head. The choice was simple. Let the helicopter fly into the ambush or risk everything to save them. Sarah thought about Hayes. Thought about him sitting in the warm fob, probably already working on his award citation for heroism under fire. Thought about Miller, who trusted her with Hayes despite knowing the kid was a liability. She made her choice. Sarah found a rocky outcrop with a clear view of the valley and settled in to wait for dawn. When that helicopter came, she'd do whatever it took to keep it alive, even if it meant exposing her position, even if it meant dying for real this time. But before she did, she was going to make Hayes pay for every lie he'd told. Night fell over the mountains like a hammer. The temperature dropped to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Sarah's breath came out in white clouds as she huddled in a shallow depression between two boulders. No fire, no light, just her, the rifle, and the two radios. Miller's voice came through on the command frequency. Hayes, come to my office. A long pause. Then Hayes, uncertain. Sir? Now, Private. Sarah smiled despite the cold. Miller was putting the pieces together. He'd always been smart like that. Could read a situation like some people read books. She waited, listening to the static. 5 minutes passed. Then Miller's voice again, but different now. Harder. Hayes, walk me through it one more time. The exact moment Sergeant Vance was hit. I already wrote it in my report, sir. I read your report. Now tell me what really happened. Another pause, longer this time. Sarah imagined Hayes squirming in his chair, trying to figure out what Miller knew, what he suspected. It was the mortar, sir. She pushed me out of the way and took the blast herself. By the time I got to her, you checked her pulse? Sir? Did you check her pulse, Private? Did you verify KIA status? Or did you just see blood and run? Silence. Sarah could hear Hayes breathing over the radio. Fast. Panicked. The truth was right there, hanging in the air between them. There was so much blood, sir, and the enemy was right there. I had to. You had to report accurate intelligence. That's what you had to do. Miller's voice was ice now. Instead, you reported a KIA without confirmation, triggered a withdrawal protocol, and left your team leader in the field. Do you understand what you've done? Sir, I thought. You didn't think. You panicked. Now I've got a sergeant who might still be alive out there, and I can't do a damn thing about it because you filed a false KIA report. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. Miller knew. He didn't have proof, but he knew. He was going to find a way to get her out. Then a new voice cut in, the battalion commander. Miller, this is actual. Stand down. Hayes's report has been reviewed and confirmed by the ops officer. Sergeant Vance is KIA. That's the official record. Sir, with respect, I don't believe Hayes's report is accurate. I'm requesting authorization to... Denied. We're not risking a full recovery mission based on your gut feeling, Master Sergeant. Hayes is a young soldier who saw his NCO killed in combat. He's traumatized. You're out of line. Sir, that's an order, Miller. Let it go. The radio went silent. Sarah sat in the dark, feeling the cold seep into her bones. They weren't coming. Miller believed her, but it didn't matter. The system had made its decision. She was dead on paper, and that's all that counted. She checked the enemy radio. They were still active, still planning. The ambush was set for the reconnaissance flight at dawn. Miller's unauthorized flyover was going to walk straight into it. Sarah looked at the M110. 27 rounds left. Against maybe 50 or 60 hostiles in the valley below. The smart play was to stay hidden, wait for a better opportunity, survive. But Sarah Vance hadn't joined the army to make smart plays. She started planning her assault. Sarah spent the first hour of darkness doing something she'd learned from Miller years ago. Making a plan, then making 3 backup plans for when the first one failed. The valley spread below her like a tactical nightmare. 6 buildings, multiple fighting positions, at least 4 heavy machine gun emplacements she could identify through the rifle scope. The enemy had turned the weapons cache into a fortress, and they were waiting for Miller's helicopter to fly into their kill zone at dawn. She checked her watch. 2,100 hours, 9 hours until first light. Her ribs screamed with every breath. The head wound had stopped bleeding but left a crust of dried blood down the side of her face. Her left ear was completely deaf, filled with a constant ringing that made it hard to focus. She'd used the last of her water an hour ago. The enemy radio crackled. Sarah pressed it to her good ear, catching fragments of Dari. They were rotating guards. 20 men on perimeter watch, the rest sleeping in shifts. Professional discipline. These weren't farmers with AKs. These were trained fighters. She did the math. 27 rifle rounds, maybe 30 pistol rounds, against 50-plus hostiles with crew-served weapons and RPGs. The numbers didn't work. They'd never work. But she didn't need to kill them all. She just needed to disrupt their ambush long enough for Miller's bird to get clear. Create chaos. Make them think they were facing a larger force. Sarah smiled in the dark. It was a terrible plan, but it was the only plan she had. She moved down the slope at 0200, using the moonless night as cover. Every step sent lightning bolts of pain through her chest. The broken ribs grated against each other, and twice she had to stop to keep from blacking out. The enemy had set up their primary ambush position on a ridge overlooking the valley approach, exactly where a helicopter would come in low and slow for reconnaissance. 4 heavy machine guns, probably DSHKs, dug in behind sandbag emplacements. Interlocking fields of fire. Textbook ambush. Sarah counted 12 fighters on the ridge, another 8 in the valley below, clustered around the largest building. The rest would be inside, sleeping or on reserve. She settled into a position 300 meters from the ridge. Long range for the M110, especially with a cracked scope, but manageable. She'd made harder shots. The question was timing. Too early, and they'd have time to reset the ambush. Too late, and Miller's bird would already be in the kill zone. She checked the command frequency on her broken radio. Nothing yet. Miller would wait until the last possible moment to launch, trying to catch the enemy off guard at dawn. Smart. But it also meant Sarah had to hold this position for at least 4 more hours without being detected. 4 hours in sub-freezing temperatures with broken ribs and no water. She'd done worse. Barely. 300 hours. The cold was getting bad. Sarah's fingers were numb despite her gloves. She kept flexing them, trying to maintain dexterity. Can't shoot if you can't feel the trigger. The enemy radio chattered. Someone was asking about the perimeter sweep. Sarah caught the words for American and woman. They knew. Maybe not where she was, but they knew someone had survived. 2 fighters emerged from the building below, carrying AKs and a spotlight. They began sweeping the slopes, moving in a search pattern, looking for her. Sarah pressed herself flat against the rocks, controlling her breathing despite the agony in her ribs. The spotlight beam swept over her position, passing 2 feet from her head. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The fighters moved on, calling out to each other. Sarah waited until they were 50 meters away, then keyed the enemy radio to listen. Nothing on the east slope. She's probably dead from exposure by now. Command wants confirmation. Keep searching. They split up, one heading upslope, one heading down toward the valley floor. The one coming upslope was heading straight for her position. Sarah had maybe 2 minutes before he'd be on top of her. She could take him quietly with a knife, but that would leave a body. Bodies got found. Found bodies meant reinforcements. She made her decision. Let him pass, stay hidden. The mission was disrupting the ambush, not killing scouts. The fighter climbed past her, so close she could smell cigarette smoke on his clothes. His boot came down 6 inches from her hand. She held perfectly still, barely breathing, watching him through slitted eyes. He paused, turned, swept his light across the rocks one more time. Sarah's hand tightened on her knife grip. Then his radio squawked, someone calling him back. The fighter muttered something under his breath and headed back down the slope. Sarah exhaled slowly, forcing her heart rate down. Too close. 200 miles away at FOB Viper, Master Sergeant Miller sat in the operations center, staring at the duty log. Hayes's after-action report was open on the screen in front of him. He'd read it 11 times now. Something was wrong with it. The details didn't line up. The ops officer, Captain Reeves, walked in carrying coffee. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." Miller didn't look up from the screen. "Hayes's report says Vance was hit by a direct mortar strike. Says he saw the impact." "That's what he reported." "Then why didn't he mark her position on the GPS? Standard procedure for KIA is to tag the location for recovery." Reeves frowned. "Maybe he forgot. The kid was under fire, traumatized." "Hayes is a coward, not an idiot." Miller finally looked up. "He knows the protocols. If he really saw Vance get hit, he would have marked it. It's muscle memory." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't think he checked. I think he saw blood, panicked, and ran." Reeves set down his coffee. "That's a serious accusation. It's a serious situation. I've got a sergeant who might still be alive out there, and we wrote her off because a scared private couldn't handle contact." "Miller, even if you're right, and that's a big if, we can't authorize a recovery mission on speculation. The area is too hot." "Then let me do a flyover, single bird, quick recon. If she's alive, she'll signal. And if the enemy's waiting, we lose a helicopter and crew." Miller leaned forward. "Sarah Vance has been in my unit for 4 years. She saved my ass twice and earned a Bronze Star in Kandahar. If there's even a chance she's alive, I'm not leaving her out there." Reeves was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Unauthorized recon at 0600. One pass, low and fast. If you get shot down, this conversation never happened." "Understood." Miller stood up and headed for the flight line. He had 2 hours to prep a Black Hawk and convince a pilot to fly into what might be an ambush. But Sarah was out there. He knew it in his gut. And Miller had learned a long time ago to trust his gut over paperwork. Sarah's watch alarm vibrated against her wrist. 1 hour until dawn. 1 hour until Miller's bird came in. The enemy was getting ready. She could see fighters moving into position on the ridge, checking weapons, adjusting fields of fire. They were excited, talking on the radio about how they were going to shoot down an American helicopter. Some of them had probably never engaged a bird before. They'd be trigger-happy, dangerous. Sarah began selecting targets. The heavy machine gun crews first. 4 positions, 4 shots. Then the RPG teams. 3 that she could see. 7 shots total before they figured out where she was shooting from. After that, chaos. She'd have maybe 30 seconds before every gun in the valley turned on her position. 30 seconds to create enough confusion to buy Miller time to abort. Her ribs throbbed with every heartbeat. The cold had worked its way into her bones, making her joints stiff. She stretched carefully, working blood back into her fingers. Can't afford to miss, not with only 27 rounds. The enemy radio crackled. Someone was asking about the helicopter's expected approach vector. Another voice responded, "From the northeast, low altitude. They'll come up the valley. We'll have them in the kill zone for at least 30 seconds. 30 seconds. More than enough time to turn a Black Hawk into scrap metal. Sarah settled in behind the rifle, adjusting the scope. The crack in the glass created a spiderweb distortion on the right side, but the center reticle was clear. Good enough. She took a breath, feeling the pain spike through her chest. Exhaled slowly. Took another breath. This was it. After this, there was no going back. Every hostile in the valley would know exactly where she was. She thought about Hayes, wondered if he was sleeping well back at base, comfortable in the lie he'd told. Wondered what his face would look like when she walked out of the mountains alive. That thought made her smile. The sound reached her first, the distinctive whop, whop, whop of Black Hawk rotors echoing off the mountain walls. Miller was coming in from the northeast, exactly where the enemy expected. Sarah pressed her eye to the scope. The heavy machine gun crews were ready, fingers on triggers. The RPG teams had weapons up on their shoulders. They were going to light up that bird the moment it cleared the ridge. She found the first target. Gunner on the leftmost DSHK position. Put the crosshairs on his chest. Felt her heartbeat slow. Exhaled. Squeezed. The M110 bucked against her shoulder. The suppressed shot echoed like a crack of stone. The gunner dropped. His loader looked up, confused, trying to figure out where the shot came from. Sarah was already on the second target. The next gunner, 40 meters right, squeezed. He went down, clutching his throat. Now the enemy knew they were under fire, but they didn't know from where. Men were shouting, pointing in different directions. The Black Hawk was still 10 seconds out. Third shot, third gunner. This one saw her muzzle flash and tried to swing his weapon around. Too slow. He dropped across the gun, blood pooling on the sandbags. Fourth shot, fourth gunner. The loader this time, the actual gunner was already diving for cover. The loader went down hard. The RPG teams were scrambling now. One fighter got his launcher up, tracking the helicopter. Sarah put a round through his shoulder. He spun away, the RPG firing wild, the rocket corkscrewing into the valley floor 50 meters from target. The Black Hawk pilot saw the explosion and immediately banked hard right, gaining altitude. Miller's voice came through on the radio. "Taking fire! Aborting approach!" Good, get out, get clear. But the enemy wasn't done. A fifth heavy gun she hadn't spotted opened up from inside one of the buildings. Tracers reached up toward the climbing helicopter. Sarah saw impacts sparkle along the Black Hawk's tail boom. She shifted aim, put 3 rounds through the building's window. The gun went silent. Then every fighter in the valley opened fire on her position. Bullets screamed off the rocks around her. AK rounds, PKM fire, RPG explosions. The entire mountainside erupted in a wall of lead and shrapnel. Sarah rolled left, abandoning her position as a DSHK tore apart the rocks where she'd been lying. She came up running, staying low, using the terrain. A burst of fire chewed up the ground at her feet. She dove behind a boulder as an RPG detonated 10 meters behind her, the concussion wave slamming her into the stone. Her broken ribs screamed, vision grayed. She forced herself to move. The enemy radio was going crazy, multiple voices shouting orders, trying to coordinate. They knew they'd been had. The helicopter was gone, and they'd exposed their entire ambush position to an enemy they couldn't see. Sarah kept moving, climbing higher, getting distance and elevation. The enemy fire was getting sporadic now. They were shooting at shadows, wasting ammunition. She counted to 60, then stopped behind a rock outcrop to check her gear. Rifle intact. 18 rounds left. Pistol still secure. First aid kit crushed by an RPG blast, contents scattered. No medical supplies, no water. and now the entire valley knew approximately where she was. She checked the command frequency. Miller's voice, tight but controlled. Viper 6, Bravo 6. Bird is damaged but flyable. Took multiple hits to tail section, returning to base. Copy, Bravo 6. What's your assessment of ground situation? A pause, then, someone down there was covering our approach. Took out their gun positions before we came into range. Professional work. Survivors from Bravo 2? Another pause, longer this time. Could be, or could be friendly SOF in the area we don't know about. Recommend we get ISR over that valley ASAP. Something's not right. Sarah smiled despite the pain. Miller knew. He couldn't prove it, but he knew she was alive. And he was going to find a way to get her out. But first, she had to survive the next few hours. Because the enemy was coming. She could hear them on the radio, organizing a sweep. 20 men moving up the mountain in a search line. They were going to find her, and when they did, 18 bullets wasn't going to be enough. Sarah moved through the pre-dawn darkness like a ghost, staying ahead of the pursuit. She could hear them behind her, calling to each other, spreading out in a line to cover more ground. Professional, disciplined, getting closer. Her ribs were on fire. Every breath felt like inhaling broken glass. The head wound had reopened during the firefight, blood running down into her right eye. She wiped it away and kept moving. The terrain was working against her. The higher she climbed, the more exposed she became. But going down meant walking into the enemy's arms. She was trapped in a vertical kill box, and they knew it. She found a defensive position in a cluster of boulders and stopped to catch her breath. Below her, she could see the search line advancing. 15 men visible. Maybe more she couldn't see. They were moving slowly, carefully, checking every rock and shadow. Sarah checked her ammunition. 18 rounds in the rifle, 2 pistol magazines. Call it 50 rounds total. Against 15 or more hostiles. The math didn't work. It was never going to work. She needed to change the equation. Sarah scanned the area looking for anything she could use. The boulders formed a natural funnel, forcing anyone coming upslope to pass through a narrow gap. Good defensive position, but also a trap. Once she started shooting from here, they'd know exactly where she was. Then she saw it. 30 meters upslope, a pile of loose scree balanced on a steep section of mountain. Unstable. One good impact could bring the whole thing down. She formed a plan. Terrible plan. Probably suicidal. But better than sitting here waiting to die. Sarah climbed out of the boulder cluster and moved upslope, staying low. The search line was still 50 meters below her, moving slow. She had maybe 3 minutes before they reached the funnel. She reached the scree pile and took up position above it. Aimed the M110 at the largest boulder in the formation. Took a breath. Fired 3 rounds. The boulder cracked, shifted, then began to slide. The entire scree pile started moving, gaining momentum as it tumbled down the mountainside. Tons of rock and debris cascading down in a roaring avalanche. The fighters below looked up just in time to see the mountain coming down on them. The rock slide hit the search line like a hammer. Men screamed, tried to run. Most didn't make it. Sarah watched through the scope as the avalanche swept 6 fighters off their feet and carried them down the mountain. 2 more were buried where they stood. The rest scattered, breaking formation, running for their lives. The radio exploded with panicked voices. Someone was screaming for a medic. Someone else was calling for backup. The search had turned into a rescue operation. Sarah used the chaos to move. She climbed higher, getting distance while they were disorganized. Her ribs protested every step, but she ignored them. Pain was just information. It told you that you were still alive. She found a cave entrance, barely more than a crack in the rock face, and squeezed inside. The space was narrow, maybe 4 feet deep, but it was shelter, hidden. She could rest here for a few minutes. Sarah slumped against the stone wall, breathing hard. The pain was getting worse. The broken ribs were more than just cracked now. One of them was physically displaced, grinding against something it shouldn't be. Maybe a lung, maybe worse. She checked her watch. 0630 hours. The sun was coming up. She'd been in the mountains for 14 hours since Hayes left her for dead. The enemy radio crackled. They were regrouping, calling in reinforcements from the valley. Fresh fighters, rested and angry. They'd lost at least 8 men to her rifle and the rock slide. They wanted blood. Sarah allowed herself 30 seconds to close her eyes. Just 30 seconds. Then she'd move again. Had to keep moving, stay ahead, survive. She thought about Hayes, wondered if he'd heard about the helicopter engagement, wondered if he was scared. He should be, because when she got back, and she was getting back, she was going to make sure everyone knew what he'd done. Her 30 seconds were up. She opened her eyes and crawled out of the cave into the dawn light, and found herself staring at 3 fighters standing 10 feet away. They'd flanked her, climbed up from the west while she was hiding in the cave. Smart. She hadn't expected them to be that smart. For a frozen moment, nobody moved. Sarah was still halfway out of the cave, vulnerable, off balance. The fighters had AKs up but weren't firing. They wanted her alive. Prisoner. Intelligence value. Sarah moved first. She rolled left, bringing the M110 up one-handed. Fired. The suppressed shot took the closest fighter in the chest. He went down hard. The other 2 opened fire, but Sarah was already moving. She dropped the rifle and drew her M9 in one fluid motion. Fired twice. Both fighters dropped. She lay on the cold stone, breathing hard, blood running from her reopened head wound. 3 more dead. 15 rounds left in the rifle. 1 magazine left in the pistol. The radio was screaming now. The fighters' unit had heard the shots. They knew where she was. They were coming. Sarah grabbed the M110 and started climbing. No more hiding, no more resting. Just movement. Survival. 1 foot in front of the other until her body gave out or the enemy caught her. Whichever came first. Miller stood in front of the battalion commander's desk, his jaw tight. The Black Hawk was being repaired behind him, mechanics swarming over the damaged tail section. "You're telling me you think Sergeant Vance is still alive?" The commander's voice was flat, skeptical. "I'm telling you someone on that mountain took out 4 heavy machine gun positions in under 30 seconds. Professional marksmanship, American tactics, and they did it specifically to cover our approach. Could be SOF, Delta, SEALs, someone we don't know about. I checked. No friendly assets in that AO. Just us and whoever's on that mountain." The commander leaned back in his chair. "Even if you're right, and that's a big if, we can't authorize a recovery mission. The area's too hot. We'd need a full platoon, air support, maybe armor. That's not happening based on speculation." "Then let me take a small team. 4 men. Fast rope in, fast rope out. 5 minutes on the ground." "Denied." "Sir, that's final, Master Sergeant. I've already lost 1 soldier on this clusterfuck. I'm not losing more." The commander stood up. "Hayes's report stands. Sergeant Vance is KIA. We'll recover the body when the tactical situation permits. Dismissed." Miller didn't salute. He just turned and walked out. In the hallway, he found Hayes sitting outside the command post. The kid looked up, his eyes red from lack of sleep. Or crying, hard to tell. "Sergeant Miller, I just wanted to say..." Miller grabbed Hayes by the front of his uniform and slammed him against the wall. The kid's eyes went wide with fear. "Listen very carefully," Miller said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know you didn't check Vance's pulse. I know you panicked and ran. And when I prove it, you're going to prison for dereliction of duty." "I didn't. I tried to..." "Shut up." Miller leaned closer. "Sarah Vance is alive on that mountain, and I'm going to get her back. And when I do, you're going to tell her to her face what you did." He released Hayes and walked away, leaving the kid gasping against the wall. Miller had a helicopter to repair and a rescue mission to plan. The commander had said no, but Miller hadn't asked permission. He'd asked forgiveness. There was a difference. Sarah had been running for 3 hours. The enemy was everywhere now. She'd counted at least 30 fighters spread across the mountain, moving in coordinated teams. They'd learned from the rock slide. Now they were staying spread out, using cover, advancing by teams. She was down to 9 rifle rounds and 1 pistol magazine. Her water was gone. The head wound wouldn't stop bleeding. The ribs had gone from painful to agonizing to numb. That was bad. Numb meant nerve damage, meant something was very wrong inside. She needed to find shelter, needed to find water, needed medical attention she wasn't going to get. What she found instead was a body, not enemy, American. He was wearing the same digital camouflage as Sarah, same boots, same gear. A scout from another unit, judging by his equipment. He'd been dead maybe 2 days, shot multiple times. Sarah rolled him over and found his radio still clipped to his vest. She turned it on. The battery was at 20%, but it worked. More importantly, it could transmit. She'd found her voice. Sarah keyed the radio, switching to the command frequency. Viper 6, this is Bravo 2 actual. How copy? Static. She tried again. Viper 6, this is Sergeant Sarah Vance. I am alive and in need of immediate extraction. How copy? More static. Then, cutting through the noise, Bravo 2, this is Viper 6. Authenticate Sierra 27. The authentication code. Proof she was who she said she was. Sarah gave it, rattling off the 12-digit sequence from memory. Silence. Then, holy shit. Vance, what's your status? Broken ribs, head trauma, possible internal bleeding. Being pursued by approximately 30 hostiles. I need extraction. Over. Copy that, stand by. Sarah waited, pressing herself flat against the rocks. She could hear the enemy below, getting closer. They'd heard the radio transmission. They were converging. Miller's voice came back. Bravo 2, we cannot authorize medevac to your location. The area is too hot. Enemy has air defense capabilities. Copy that, 6. I understand. Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. They weren't coming. She'd found her voice, but it didn't matter. Then Miller continued. However, if you could mark a clear LZ and suppress enemy air defense, we might be able to get a bird in. Strictly hypothetical, you understand. Sarah smiled. Miller was telling her to do the impossible. Take out the enemy's air defense with 9 rifle rounds and create a safe landing zone in the middle of a combat zone. Hypothetically. Copy, 6. Hypothetically, I could make that happen, but I'd need air support. Hypothetically. Hypothetically, there might be an Apache gunship refueling right now that could provide covering fire. If someone were to laser designate targets. Sarah checked her gear. She didn't have a laser designator. She had 9 bullets and a prayer. 6, I don't have designation equipment. Copy, but hypothetically, if you could mark targets with tracer fire, the Apache could engage. Hypothetically. Sarah laughed. It hurt like hell, but she laughed anyway. Miller was going off book, completely unauthorized, risking his career and possibly a court-martial. For her. Hypothetically, 6, you're a crazy old bastard. Copy that, Bravo 2. Apache is wheels up in 10 mics. Find that LZ. Sarah looked down into the valley. The weapons cache buildings were still there, still surrounded by fighters, still had the air defense weapons that had almost shot down Miller's Black Hawk. 9 rounds, 30 hostiles, impossible odds. She'd faced worse, hypothetically. Sarah moved down the mountain toward the valley, using every bit of cover she could find. The enemy was still searching the upper slopes, thinking she'd keep climbing. They didn't expect her to come straight at them. Amateur mistake. Never assume your enemy will do the logical thing. She found her position on a ridge overlooking the valley, 300 meters from the main building where she'd seen the heavy machine guns. Perfect range for the M110. She checked her ammunition one last time. 9 rounds. She'd need to make them count. The enemy radio crackled. They'd found the dead American scout. They knew she had a working radio now. They were moving to jam frequencies, set up signal interception. Sarah switched the radio to emergency frequency, a backup channel that was rarely monitored but hard to jam. She keyed the mic. Viper 6, Bravo 2, I'm in position, ready to mark targets. Copy. Apache is 5 minutes out. Call sign Hammer 21. 5 minutes. Sarah had 5 minutes to identify targets, mark them with tracer fire, and survive long enough for the Apache to engage. She settled in behind the rifle and started scanning. 2 heavy machine gun positions visible on the rooftops. 1 RPG team in the courtyard. 1 DSHK mounted on a technical truck parked between buildings. 4 targets, 9 rounds, 5 minutes. She could do this. The Apache came in low over the ridgeline, its black silhouette stark against the morning sky. Sarah heard it before she saw it, the distinctive thwop of rotors, deeper than a Blackhawk, more aggressive. Hammer 2-1, this is Bravo 2. I am marking targets with rifle fire. Confirm visual. Bravo 2, Hammer, we have you. Mark when ready. Sarah put the crosshairs on the first machine gun position. Squeezed. The round hit 2 feet from the gunner, sparking off the metal. Close enough. First target marked, rooftop, northwest corner. Visual. Engaging. The Apache's 30mm chain gun opened up. The rooftop exploded in a storm of high-explosive rounds. The machine gun and crew disappeared in a cloud of debris. Sarah was already on the second target. Fired. Marked. The Apache engaged, tearing the position apart. Third target. The technical truck. She put a round through the windshield. The Apache's Hellfire missile turned the entire vehicle into a fireball. Fourth target. The RPG team in the courtyard. She fired her last rifle round. The Apache's gun walked across the courtyard, turning it into a killing ground. All targets suppressed, Sarah transmitted. I need immediate extraction. I'm Winchester on rifle ammo. Copy. Medevac is inbound. 30 seconds. Sarah heard the Blackhawk before she saw it. Miller's bird, tail section still showing hasty repairs, coming in fast and low. The Apache circled overhead, providing cover. The Blackhawk flared hard, touching down on a flat section of valley floor 200 meters from Sarah's position. The crew chief was waving at her, screaming something she couldn't hear over the rotors. She started running. Behind her, the remaining enemy fighters opened fire. Bullets kicked up dirt around her feet. An RPG streaked past, missing by meters. She kept running, broken ribs grinding, vision tunneling, legs threatening to give out. 100 meters. The Apache engaged, suppressing the enemy fire. 50 meters. She could see Miller standing in the Blackhawk's door, reaching out. 20 meters. Her legs gave out. She fell, hit the ground hard, felt something tear inside her chest. Couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Strong hands grabbed her under the arms. Miller. He was lifting her, carrying her, throwing her into the helicopter. She felt the bird lift off, heard the rotors accelerate. Then everything went black. Sarah woke to the smell of antiseptic in the steady beep of a heart monitor. Her chest felt like someone had wrapped it in concrete. Every breath was a negotiation with pain. She opened her eyes. White ceiling, fluorescent lights, medical bay, phobe Viper. Easy, Miller's voice, off to her left. Don't try to sit up. You've got 4 broken ribs. One of them punctured your lung. They had to put in a chest tube. Sarah turned her head slowly. Miller sat in a plastic chair beside her bed, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His uniform was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, but he was smiling. You look like shit, Sergeant. You should see the other guys. Her voice came out as a croak. Her throat was raw from intubation. Miller handed her a cup of water with a straw. She drank carefully, feeling the cold liquid trace a path down to her stomach. It was the best thing she'd ever tasted. How long was I out? 18 hours. They flew you to Bagram first, stabilized you, then brought you back here. Miller leaned forward. Sarah, you lost 2 liters of blood. Your core temperature was down to 94 degrees. The docs said if we'd found you 2 hours later, you'd have been gone. But you didn't wait 2 hours. No, I didn't. Miller's expression hardened. I broke about 15 regulations getting that bird in the air. The commander is considering a court-martial. I'll testify. Tell them. I don't care about the court-martial, Miller cut her off. I care about Hayes. That little shit filed a false KIA report, abandoned you in the field, and then sat here for 2 days playing the traumatized hero. Sarah's hands clenched on the bedsheet. Where is he? Under guard in the barracks. The commander ordered him confined, pending investigation. Miller paused. He knows you're alive. When you came on the radio yesterday, half the base heard it. He tried to run. Made it to the motor pool before the MPs grabbed him. Good. Let him run. Let him feel what she'd felt. Trapped, abandoned, terrified. I want to see him. Sarah, I want to see him, Miller. That's not a request. Miller studied her for a long moment, then nodded. The commander's on his way here. He wants your statement. Hayes will be brought in for confrontation after that. He stood up. But first, there's someone else who wants to see you. The door opened and Captain Reeves walked in, followed by a lieutenant colonel Sarah didn't recognize. The colonel had JAG insignia on his collar. Legal. This was going to be interesting. Colonel Morrison pulled up a chair and opened a tablet. Sergeant Vance, I'm here to take your official statement regarding the events of the past 72 hours. This will be recorded and may be used in legal proceedings. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Walk me through it, from the beginning. Sarah took a breath, carefully, mindful of her punctured lung, and started talking. She told them everything. The mission briefing, Hayes' nervousness, the ambush, the mortar strike, waking up buried under rubble while Hayes reported her dead. Morrison's expression never changed, but she saw his jaw tighten when she got to the part about Hayes running without checking her pulse. Did Private Hayes make any attempt to verify your status before reporting you as KIA? No, sir. I was conscious. I saw him look at me. He knew I was alive, and he ran anyway. That's a serious allegation. It's the truth, sir. Morrison made notes on his tablet. Continue. She told them about the survival, the broken radio that only received, hearing Hayes lie about trying to save her, the enemy's search parties, the cold, the field surgery she'd performed on herself with a combat knife and no anesthetic. Reeves went pale when she described cutting away the necrotic tissue from her leg wound. Morrison just kept taking notes. She told them about disrupting the enemy ambush, about the rock slide, about finding the dead American scout and his working radio, about Miller's unauthorized rescue. When she finished, Morrison set down his tablet. Sergeant Vance, your actions over the past 3 days demonstrate extraordinary courage and tactical proficiency. You single-handedly prevented the loss of a helicopter and crew, eliminated at least 15 enemy combatants, and survived in hostile territory with severe injuries and no support. Thank you, sir. However, Morrison leaned forward. Private Hayes' actions, if your account is accurate, constitute dereliction of duty, filing a false report, and potentially cowardice in the face of the enemy. These are career-ending charges, possibly criminal charges. I understand, sir. Are you certain about your statement? Once we proceed, there's no going back. Sarah met his eyes. I'm certain, sir. Hayes left me to die because he was too scared to do his job. If Master Sergeant Miller hadn't trusted his instincts over a false report, I'd be dead right now. Hayes needs to answer for that. Morrison nodded slowly. Very well, we'll bring him in. They wheeled Sarah's bed into a conference room. She refused to stay lying down, so Miller helped her sit up despite the protest from the medic. The chest tube pulled with every movement, but she didn't care. She was going to look Hayes in the eye for this. The door opened, and 2 MPs escorted Hayes inside. The kid looked like he'd aged 10 years. His eyes were hollow, his skin pale. His hands were shaking. He saw Sarah and stopped dead. The MPs had to push him forward to get him moving again. "Sit down, Private," Morrison said. Hayes sat. He wouldn't look at Sarah, kept his eyes on the table. "Private Hayes, this is your opportunity to provide your version of events. Sergeant Vance has given her statement. Now I want to hear yours." Morrison activated a recorder. "For the record, this interview is being conducted on November 12th at 14:30 hours. Present are myself, Colonel Morrison, Captain Reeves, Master Sergeant Miller, and Sergeant Sarah Vance. Private Hayes, do you understand that you are being questioned regarding events that may result in disciplinary or criminal action?" "Yes, sir." Hayes's voice was barely a whisper. "Walk me through the ambush, the moment Sergeant Vance was hit." Hayes took a shaking breath. "We were on the ridge. They came from behind us. Sarah, Sergeant Vance, she pushed me toward cover. Then the mortar hit. There was smoke and fire and I couldn't see anything." "What did you do next?" I looked for her. The wall had collapsed. There was blood. So much blood." "Did you check her pulse?" Silence. "Private Hayes, did you check Sergeant Vance's pulse?" "I couldn't reach her. The enemy was right there. They were shooting at me." "That's not what I asked." Morrison's voice was ice. "Did you physically touch Sergeant Vance to verify her status before reporting her as KIA?" More silence. Hayes stared at the table. Sarah spoke for the first time. "Look at me, Hayes." He didn't move. "I said, look at me." Her voice cracked like a whip. Hayes slowly raised his eyes. When he met Sarah's gaze, she saw everything she needed to see. Guilt, shame, fear. He knew what he'd done. He'd known it from the beginning. "You saw me," Sarah said quietly. "When you ran, you looked back and you saw me watching you. You knew I was alive." I thought you were dying. You thought you could run away and blame it on the enemy. You thought you could lie your way out of being a coward." Sarah leaned forward, ignoring the spike of pain through her chest. "How long did you practice your story, Hayes? How long did you rehearse what you'd tell everyone about how hard you tried to save me?" "I did try. I wanted to help, but you were scared, so you ran. And you let everyone think I was dead because that was easier than admitting you were too much of a coward to do your job." Hayes's face crumpled. Tears ran down his cheeks. "I'm sorry, God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. I thought you were dead and I just ran." "You didn't think I was dead." Sarah's voice was cold now, dead calm. "You hoped I was dead. Because if I was dead, no one would know what you did." The room was silent except for Hayes's quiet sobbing. Morrison closed his tablet. "Private Hayes, based on Sergeant Vance's testimony and your own statements, I am recommending you be charged with dereliction of duty, filing a false report, and failure to render aid. You will be confined pending court-martial. MPs, take him." The MPs stood up, but Hayes wasn't done. He looked at Sarah one last time. "I didn't mean for this to happen. You have to believe me. I never wanted you to—" "Get him out of here," Sarah said. They took him away. The door closed. Sarah sagged back against the pillows, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had kept her upright was draining away, leaving nothing but pain and fatigue. Miller put a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" "No," Sarah closed her eyes. "But I will be." Sarah was moved to a private room on her second day back. The chest tube came out on the third day, which hurt worse than getting it put in. But she could breathe easier, move better. The ribs would take weeks to heal fully, but she was stable. Miller visited every day, bringing contraband coffee and updates on Hayes's case. The kid had been formally charged and was awaiting court-martial. His lawyer was trying to argue PTSD, combat stress, temporary insanity. It wouldn't work. Too many witnesses, too much evidence. On the fourth day, Miller brought something different, a small cardboard box. "What's this?" "Your personal effects. They cleaned out your locker, thought you were dead." Miller set the box on the bed. "Most of it's just clothes and toiletries. But there's one thing in there I thought you should see." Sarah opened the box. On top was her dress uniform, neatly folded. Under that, her personal photos, letters from home, and at the bottom, a small wooden case. She opened it. Inside was a Bronze Star medal. Her Bronze Star from Kandahar 4 years ago. She'd earned it pulling 2 wounded soldiers out of a burning vehicle while under fire. She looked at Miller, confused. "Why is this?" "They were going to send it to your family, part of your posthumous effects." Miller's voice was rough. "I grabbed it before they could ship it. Figured you'd want it back." Sarah picked up the medal, feeling its weight in her palm. She'd almost forgotten about it. Awards and decorations felt like relics from another life. Before the mountains, before Hayes. "Miller, can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "When did you know? When did you know I was still alive?" Miller was quiet for a moment. About 30 seconds after Hayes gave his report, Kid couldn't keep his story straight. Details kept changing. Classic sign of lying. He looked at her. "Plus, you're too stubborn to die from a mortar round. I've seen you survive worse." Sarah laughed. It hurt, but it felt good. "You violated about 15 regulations to come get me." 16, actually. They found another one in the manual." Miller grinned. "Worth it, though." "Are they really going to court-martial you?" "Probably not. Hard to punish someone for saving a soldier's life." He stood up. "Get some rest. The commander wants to see you tomorrow. Something about a medal." "Another one? I've got enough medal already." "Well, this one comes with a promotion. So shut up and accept it gracefully." Miller left. Sarah lay back in the bed, holding the Bronze Star, thinking about everything that had happened. 3 days in the mountains, 15 enemy killed in action, 1 coward exposed, 1 unauthorized rescue, and somehow she was still alive. Her thoughts drifted to Hayes. He was probably in a cell right now, staring at the walls, replaying his decisions. Part of her felt sorry for him. He was young, scared, in over his head. War had broken him before he'd even had a chance to become a soldier. But a bigger part of her, the part that had spent 3 days fighting for survival while everyone thought she was dead, felt nothing but contempt. Hayes had made his choice. Now he'd live with the consequences. She closed the medal case and set it aside. Tomorrow she'd see the commander, accept whatever medal and promotion they wanted to give her, smile for the ceremony, play the hero. But tonight, she was just Sarah Vance. Alive, damaged, but still breathing. That was enough. The ceremony was small, just the battalion staff, Miller's unit, and a few reporters from Stars and Stripes. Sarah stood at attention in her dress uniform, specially tailored to accommodate the bandages still wrapped around her ribs, while the battalion commander pinned the silver star to her chest. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an enemy of the United States, the commander read from the citation. Sergeant First Class Sarah Vance distinguished herself by exceptionally valorous actions while isolated in enemy territory. Sarah tuned out the rest. She'd read the citation. It made her sound like some kind of superhero. Reality had been messier, bloodier, less heroic and more desperate. The commander finished reading and stepped back. "Congratulations, Sergeant First Class Vance. The nation is proud of your service." "Thank you, sir." The reporters took photos. Sarah shook hands with officers she barely knew. Accepted congratulations from soldiers who looked at her like she was made of something stronger than bone and blood. Miller found her after the ceremony, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Sergeant First Class. Got a nice ring to it." "It's just a rank, Miller. It's a promotion you earned. Don't diminish it. He handed her a coffee. Although between you and me, the real award is that Hayes got 20 years. Sarah nearly choked on her coffee. 20 years? They sentenced him already? This morning. Court-martial took 3 hours. Prosecution had your testimony, the radio recordings, and Hayes's own confession. Defense didn't have shit. Miller's smile was grim. Dishonorable discharge, too. He'll never wear the uniform again. 20 years. Sarah had expected something. Confinement, discharge, maybe a few years in Leavenworth. But 20 years. Hayes would be 40 years old before he got out. His entire youth gone, consumed by one moment of cowardice. She should have felt satisfaction, vindication. Instead, she just felt tired. "You okay?" Miller asked. "I don't know. Is it supposed to feel like this? Hollow?" Justice usually does. You wanted him to pay, and he did. But it doesn't undo what happened. Doesn't give you back those 3 days. Miller looked at her. But it does send a message. Next time some scared kid thinks about abandoning his team leader, maybe he'll remember Hayes. Maybe he'll do the right thing instead. Maybe. Sarah hoped so. She didn't want anyone else to go through what she'd been through. Didn't want anyone else to hear their own death reported over a radio while they lay bleeding and alone. "What are you going to do now?" Miller asked. "Heal, get cleared by medical, get back to work. You could take leave, go home for a while. No one would blame you." Sarah shook her head. "This is home, Miller, the unit, the mission. This is where I belong. Even after everything? Especially after everything." She looked at the silver star on her chest. "Hayes tried to bury me on that mountain, but I climbed out. I survived. I'm not letting him take this away from me, too." Miller nodded. "Good, because we've got a mission next week. Northern Province. Intel says there's a high-value target holed up in a compound. They want a sniper team for Overwatch. Who's carrying the radio?" "I am. Figure after Hayes, you've earned the right to never work with a boot again." Sarah laughed. "Deal." They stood there for a while, drinking their coffee, watching the ceremony break up. Soldiers heading back to their duties. Officers returning to their meetings. Life at FOB Viper moving on, already forgetting the drama of the past week. But Sarah wouldn't forget. Couldn't forget. The mountains were still out there. The enemy was still out there. And somewhere in a military prison, Hayes was beginning his 20-year sentence. The war continued, and so did she. Sarah stood in the same briefing room where this had all started. Same plywood walls, same burnt coffee smell, same flickering projector. But everything was different. She was different. The ribs had healed. The scars had faded. But something inside her had changed during those 3 days on the mountain. She was harder now, more focused, less patient with bullshit and excuses. Miller stood at the front of the room, briefing the next mission. Sarah listened, taking notes, her M110 rifle case leaning against her chair. She'd gotten a new scope. The old one, cracked and damaged, sat on her desk back at her quarters. A reminder. "Any questions?" Miller asked. The room was quiet. The new soldiers, the ones who'd replaced Hayes and the others who'd rotated home, looked nervous. They'd all heard the stories about Sarah, about the ghost report, about the sergeant who'd been left for dead and fought her way back. Some of them looked at her with admiration, others with fear, a few with calculation, wondering if they'd measure up if the situation ever came. Sarah hoped they never had to find out. The briefing ended. The soldiers filed out. Sarah was gathering her gear when a private approached. Young kid, maybe 19, fresh-faced and eager. "Sergeant Vance, can I ask you something?" "Make it quick." "What was it like, being out there alone?" Sarah looked at him for a long moment, saw Hayes in his nervous expression, saw every scared soldier who'd ever worn the uniform, saw herself years ago, before the mountains had taught her what she was really made of. "It was cold," she said finally, "and it hurt. And there were moments I didn't think I'd make it. She picked up her rifle case. But I did, because quitting wasn't an option. Giving up wasn't an option. You do what you have to do to survive, and you don't stop until you're home. How do you know if you're strong enough? You don't, not until it happens. Sarah headed for the door, then paused. But here's the thing, Private. Strength isn't about being fearless. It's about being scared shitless and doing your job anyway. Remember that. She walked out into the Afghan sun. The heat hit her like a physical force after the air-conditioned briefing room. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the sound of helicopter rotors. A Black Hawk, heading out on patrol. Sarah closed her eyes and listened. The sound used to remind her of abandonment, of watching that helicopter bank away and leave her to die. But now it reminded her of Miller, coming through the mountains to get her, of the Apache gunship that had saved her life, of the moment she'd been pulled into that bird and felt its wheels leave the ground, the sound of survival. She opened her eyes and headed toward the motor pool. Miller was waiting with a Humvee. They had a mission to prep for, intel to review, a northern compound to surveil. The war continued, and so did she. At Leavenworth Military Prison, in a small cell with a narrow window, David Hayes sat on his bunk and stared at the wall. He tried writing letters to Sarah, tried apologizing, tried explaining. She never responded. Miller had written once, a short message that said everything Hayes needed to know. You made your choice. Live with it. So he did. Every day. For 20 years. He thought about the mountains, about the moment he'd looked back and seen Sarah watching him from under the rubble, about the choice he'd made to run instead of stay, about the lie he'd told to cover his cowardice. One moment, one decision. That's all it took to destroy a life. In his cell, Hayes had plenty of time to think about that. 20 years of time, 200 miles away in a different prison, this one made of mountains and sand and endless missions. Sarah Vance checked her gear and loaded her rifle. She thought about Hayes sometimes, wondered if he understood what he'd taken from her. Not just the 3 days in the mountains, but the innocence, the trust, the belief that her brothers and sisters in arms would always have her back. Hayes had taken that, and she'd never get it back. But she'd survived anyway, had climbed out of that hole, fought her way through enemy territory, and made it home. Had taken the worst thing that could happen to a soldier, abandonment by your own, and turned it into fuel. She was stronger now, harder, better, and every mission, every shot, every time she brought her team home safe, was proof that Hayes hadn't broken her. The war had tried, Hayes had tried, the mountains had tried. They'd all failed. Sarah Vance was still standing.